Welcome once again. Thank you for your attendance. Blessing to have all of you here in person, and those of you who are online, welcome as well. Today we are going to cover Joshua chapter 2 on your bulletins. There's just a reference of the chapter, but today we're actually only going to cover the first 11 verses of said chapter. It's a very well-known story of Rahab and the Spies. And because it is a well-known story, obviously we'll go through, the different elements of this narrative, but we will focus on aspects of the story that are especially interesting because this story has a lot of ethical dilemmas. So whenever an ethical dilemma comes up, we'll spend a little bit of time on it, discussing. Most likely we will not have the end-all be-all answers to these ethical dilemmas, but at the very least we will address those. So again, Joshua chapter 2, I will read from verse 1 through verse 11, and you can follow along either in the projection or in your Bibles and gadgets. And it says here, "Now Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out 2 men from Acacia Grove to spy secretly, saying, 'Go view the land, especially Jericho.' So they went and came to the house of a harlot named Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told to the king of Jericho, saying, 'Behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country.' So the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, 'Bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out the country.' Then the woman took the 2 men and hid them. So she said, 'Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And it happened as the gate was being shut, when it was dark, that the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them.' But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof." Verse 7. "Then the men pursued them by the road of the Jordan to the fords. And as soon as those who pursued them had gone out, they shut the gate. Now, before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to them, 'I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites, who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted, neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath.'" So again, we have the very well-known story of Rahab. And here we do have a little map for us to get situated as to what is happening, not only right now, but leading up to this particular time in history. And this map, it's a general assessment and geographical kind of look as to where the children of Israel are in a particular book and time frame. So in Genesis, we have that region right there where the patriarchs were, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and eventually Joseph. As we know, based on our knowledge of the Hebrew history, eventually they end up in Egypt, become slaves. And we have the Exodus through the leadership of Moses. They cross the Red Sea, roam around. Mount Sinai is where you have the law given, the 10 Commandments. Eventually, they continue to roam around the desert. That's the account after Leviticus in Numbers. And now, as we are moving upwards into Deuteronomy and eventually Joshua, this is the region that they are at crossing or about to cross the Jordan River, or actually technically are on their way to conquer the Promised Land. I made a reference or a note last week that they had already conquered the portion of the Jordan that is east, and now again they are going to start to take over the portion on the other side. And prior to actually doing so, and as they have done before, Joshua sends out spies. You probably remember that Joshua himself was a spy at a point in history when Moses was still in leadership of the Hebrews. And this was, something common, something rather strategic here. The only difference is there are fewer spies than at that particular time. And it seems like here it was a little bit more of a secretive thing, because the mention of this, there's also the added idea of to spy secretly. I don't know if there's another way to spy. I guess if you're going to spy, you should spy secretly. And maybe a reference to Joshua not telling anyone else that he was sending spies, or again, he's just kind of emphasizing the sneakiness of it all. And while Joshua sent these two individuals, the people were waiting there at the Jordan, basically. There's a reference on chapter 1, verse 10 or verse 11, where Joshua lets the people know to prepare for a few days, 3 days, while, this is all happening. And as I read the story, and you follow along, and again, most of us, if not all of us, are pretty familiar with this particular story. The spies, they end up in a particular place in Jericho. Jericho was a very fortified city. It was a huge challenge for them, and if they were able to take over this particular city, it's not that everything else would have been easy, but it would have been a great start. So again, the spies go out to just discover what is out there, what they have in store for them, and they end up in this lady's house. Her name being Rahab. And now we confront our first dilemma. What is our first dilemma here? Well, the Bible every once in a while, it qualifies on their pedigree, based on the area that they were born, based on their ethnicity. But here, the qualifier is based on a profession. Now, we would love to maybe rewrite history and have Rahab the teacher. Rahab the carpenter, sort of like Jesus. Rahab the nurse, the midwife. Rahab the pagan princess. But no. Rahab was a prostitute. And some people actually try to rewrite history in certain commentaries and extra biblical stories and make Rahab into, I don't know, like the owner of a bed and breakfast, if you will. An innkeeper, right? The fact of the matter is, she was a prostitute. It is very clearly stated here in the Old Testament, and also when there is references made of Rahab in the New Testament, it's always Rahab the harlot. Now bear in mind, it's the New Testament, right? You'd figure, okay, enough time has gone by. We don't want to just focus on that part of her history, because after the fact, very likely she didn't remain a harlot, yet the biblical text, the authors, the Holy Spirit, if you will, they go out of their way to make sure that we understand that she was a harlot. All of us, maybe most of us, I should say, we know what that means. A prostitute. We are aware of what that means. However, most of us, if not all, are not aware of the circumstances that takes a person towards that line of work and profession. We have our ethics. We have our morals. We know the difference between right and wrong. But truth be told, the great majority of the time that we pick right versus wrong is purely circumstantial. Put us in a bad place, in a bad time, under horrible circumstances, things that we don't see any other way, most of us would become prostitutes, such as Rahab. Now, this is not justifying the fact. This is purely explaining human nature. Most of us would do the very thing that she was doing, put into the wrong place at the wrong time in history, within, a certain amount of social pressures, if you will. Yet, again, we don't know what that even means. We know how to define the word, and we know that it is a bad word, a bad profession, something sinful, something ungodly, immoral, unethical. Yet we do not know how it feels to think that that is the only option that a person has to survive, even. Not a justification. However, it is an explanation of our human condition, our fallen human condition. Most of us would be in the same place. So this is kind of the moral dilemma that we have initially here. But the moral dilemma, there's actually a part A and a part B. Because not only are we clear that this is what she was, what she did, but what were the spies doing at the house of a prostitute? What were they doing there? Well, again, human condition. It would be silly for us not to acknowledge the possibility, at the very least, that they were there seeking the services of a prostitute. There is a possibility. We need not deny that because of our human condition, our fallen human condition. But that is not the only option. We don't know for sure. We have to acknowledge that that is a possibility, but that is not the only possibility, and maybe even not the best possibility. Because strategically speaking, the house of a prostitute would be ideal to kind of hide out into. Think about it for a second. It is the type of place that people don't ask too many questions. Wouldn't you agree? Turn a blind eye to who's coming in and coming out. A place that is a little darker than most others. A place where anonymity abounds. Don't ask my name. Don't ask where I come from. Don't ask too many questions. So quite possibly, it was rather strategic. But again, just another possibility. Fact of the matter is, they were there. And they were there overnight. And if it was something rather strategic, it really didn't work. They might as well could have gone to another place because they were found out. How were they found out? We don't know. Who told them? Your guess is as good as mine. But they were found out. And when they were found out, the person in charge, the king, sent for Rahab. And essentially said, look, we know who you have in there. Very often we don't care. We could care less, right? You're providing a service. And who cares who goes in and out? But it came to my attention that certain people went into your place of work that we are particularly worried about, interested in. These are enemies. We think they are trying to scope out our land so that they can take over. Now, you tell us, what is happening here? Who are these people? What are they doing? Are they still with you? Let us have them. So Rahab was confronted. And when she was confronted, obviously, she gave a response. And we have the response from verse 4 to verse 7. And specifically looking at verse 4 to verse 5, we encounter another dilemma. What is this other dilemma? Not only was Rahab a prostitute, but she was a lying prostitute. Which I guess makes matters worse, right? Because, again, look at the response. From verse 4 to verse 5, she makes several claims. And let's just kind of analyze exactly what she said and make an assessment of whether or not she is lying. Starting on verse 4, she goes on to say, then the woman took the two men and hid them. So she said, yes, the man came to me. Okay, first statement, we're good. She had no way to deny that, right? Literally, she had no way to deny because they were already aware. If she lied here, it would have been foolish. So, good for you, Rahab. Can't deny that you're a prostitute, but so far, honest one. But let's see, what else do you have to say? But I did not know where they came from. Half-truth at best? Maybe she could have been rationalizing, well, I'm saying this as they entered my doors. And as I welcomed them into my home, we do that, right? Have you ever rationalized something like that? You don't really want to tell the truth, so you're looking at a portion of the truth that you can focus on so that you can, again, focus on that and not have to tell the rest of that said truth, right? So maybe she was doing that, maybe not. But at the very best, it was a half-truth. Didn't know. But then she goes on. I did not know where they came from. Verse 5. And it happened as the gate was being shut when it was dark that the man went out. Uh-oh. See how it's getting truth, maybe half-truth? Blatant lie. There is no way to salvage this, right? There is no way to remedy this. A lie. Okay, maybe that was the only lie. Because, if you add those up, a truth, a half-truth, and a lie, you put it on a scale. You're not the most horrible person in the world, a complete liar, but you're not, just such an honest person. Maybe you're just kind of average, right? Again, you just put it on a scale. It kind of seems to balance out. If she just stopped right here, we wouldn't have as much of a problem. But then she continues. She goes on to say, again, and it happened as the gate being shut when it was dark that the man went out. Where the man went, I do not know. Man. Another lie. No excuse for this. Then she goes on. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them. Come on. The ending here seems unnecessary. Don't you agree? She went out of her way. She was lying. There is no way to assess what she said and what she did other than lies. So here is the dilemma. What is the dilemma? Should she have lied? We know the story. We know the end of the story. We know how she is actually highly regarded. A hero, an example of faith. A liar. A lying prostitute. Should she have lied? Isn't lying wrong? Isn't it a sin? These are the same types of questions that we raise, for example, when we assess those people that hid the Jews during the Holocaust. People knocked on their doors and asked, hey, have you seen any of them? Are you hiding any of them? Many of them were saved because of lies. Dilemma. How do you answer that question? Should she have lied? Should they have lied? I guess the beginning of answering that question is this. Shut up. Shut up. There is no justifying lies. Lying in any circumstance, in any situation, done by anyone for any reason is wrong, is bad, is a sin. I personally do not believe, and I hope you don't believe as well, that morality is relative to circumstances. I believe that based on biblical truth, there are certain things as moral absolutes. What does that mean? Regardless of who is doing it, when they are doing it, what reason they are doing it, whether they think it's a good reason for doing such, it is still wrong. It is still a sin. However, having said that, even though there are moral, ethical absolutes, the only person who can absolutely fulfill them is God. That's the human condition. That's who we are. That is how we are. When we have problems with people such as Rahab, a lying prostitute, we are actually deceiving ourselves. We should be, that makes perfect sense. That's how she is. That's how I am. That's how we all are. Put into a bad situation at the wrong time, under the wrong pressures, that's how we all are. And it doesn't mean that we make wrong decisions all the time, but again, a lot of the time, we're not making bad decisions purely because the circumstances are pretty easy for us, so we don't have to. But the human condition dictates, push comes to shove, quite often, if not most of the time, we will make the bad decision. So it should not surprise us. The only reason why things like this surprise us is when we think too highly of ourselves, wrongly, when we gloss over the reality of humanity, when we are on our proverbial high horse, and we're looking down upon people because, frankly, We're trying to make ourselves feel better about something. Moral dilemmas, for sure. But they make perfect sense, considering the human condition. That's who she is. That's who she was. That's who we are. Frail. Imperfect. We struggle on a daily basis. We don't even have to dissect and focus on our worst day. Just evaluate an average day. How much we struggle. She was one of us. True, a pagan lying prostitute. But she was part of our human family. Just like us.
However, we know that that's not where the story ends. She goes on to make a great statement. If we fast forward to verse 8 and then go all the way to verse 11, we see one of the greatest statements of faith that could have been said by anyone, regardless of who the author was. But here, who said this? A pagan, lying prostitute. What does she say again? Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. As soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Wow. This is amazing. Everything up till this point is normal. Nothing should be shocking. This is the shocking. We should not be appalled by her profession, her lies, her demeanor, her standards, her imperfections. That makes perfect sense. That is not the shocking part. This is the shocking part. This is the counterintuitive part. This is the part that is unexpected, that we should be almost like horrified. How can someone like that make these claims? This is where the miracle happens. This is the odd part of the story. Her statement of faith, based on so very little. Wouldn't you agree? We have so much more information, resources. We have access to things that feed our faith and our knowledge about God. What does she have? She had accounts of these people who were slaves, yet were freed. And now we're conquering the world. How could they? They were just slaves. No military prowess. They weren't fighting men per se. Not only that, apparently they were really bad with directions. Because it's been a while since they left Egypt, and now only 40 years later are they here. We already counted them out. We thought they all died, but the second generation rose up, and here they are. And we keep overhearing that they're just mowing people down, conquering kings and kingdoms.
Again, thinking about the map that was there before, one portion, one side of the Jordan already conquered. And now, they're coming for us. Could it be that it's just because of them? No, it can't be because of them. It must be because of their God. The God. The Lord.
There are a couple of references of Rahab in the New Testament. In Hebrews chapter 11 and on James chapter 2. In Hebrews chapter 11 verse 31, it's stated, by faith the harlot Rahab, again emphasizing, did not perish with those who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace. So there's that famous section of Hebrews where, people who were worthy to be praised for their faith, examples of faith, heroes of faith, are being exemplified, and she is actually, one of the primary ones. And then James chapter 2, verse 25, when James is in the middle of his argument pertaining to how faith and works come together, James states, likewise was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out another way?
What is she being praised for? Is she being praised for her actions? No. The writers of the New Testament, they actually don't even mention her actions. They mention sort of the outcome. What was the outcome? She was saved. Why? Because she received the messengers. Because she helped the messengers. How? They never mentioned. Why? Because again, those things were not praiseworthy. Those things were not justifiable. That was not what made her special. And if those things were not what made her special, what was it?
Simply put, even though her imperfections, her less than godly actions were not commendable, the faith, the active faith that she had in the one who can perfectly work through our imperfections, that was what is being highlighted here. The one, the only one who can perfectly work despite, through, in spite our imperfections. Her faith in him.
Next week, we'll get to the second half of the story. So we'll talk a little bit more about the outcome. But for now, in concluding our time here, let's just think about what was argued here for a second. Rahab, the lying prostitute, part of our human condition, a member of our family, just like us. Once again, if we could rewrite history, it would be good to place her in a different light, position, profession, but we can't, and we should not. They didn't. And it almost seems, I don't know, like she let us down. Couldn't she have done a little bit better? I think God would have done whatever it is that he wanted to do, regardless of what she did. Again, his promises cannot be taken away. He was going to fulfill them. So theoretically, even if she didn't lie, something good would have occurred. Again, because God was going to fulfill his promises. And whenever we get down on a human being such as Rahab, we think, man, Come on, Rahab. Do better. So disappointing. Make the right decisions, the choices. And whenever we feel depressed, and whenever that affects us too much, whenever we're down because of that, because someone let us down, it means that we are focusing on the wrong person. The only thing that was praiseworthy about Rahab was the faith that she had in God. That's the only thing. If you focus on anything else, you will be disappointed. And likewise, the only thing that should be motivational, inspirational, that should feed our faith, that should propel us to move forward, that should solidify our beliefs, that should, keep us doing what we must do, is Him. As soon as we take our eyes and our focus off of Him and place it on people, on individuals, and then inevitably, when they falter, we get all down, it's just a matter of time. What did you expect? It makes perfect sense. That's who they are. That's who you are. That's who we are. If we focus on people, it's depressing. They will let us down. They will do bad things. Push comes to shove. Eventually and inevitably, it is bound to happen. But when we gaze and focus upon Him, who works perfectly through our imperfections, there's no need to be down. There's no need to be discouraged. There's no need to be questioning, pouting, bickering, thinking, overthinking. It's Him. All about Him. Because of Him. It is through Him. We're just here, doing the best that we can. Blessed because we have knowledge of Him. Blessed because we are a little bit better than before. Blessed because now we don't have to sin, even though we choose to so often. Blessed because now we have a purpose. Still imperfect, still human, but with a godly purpose. Focus on Him and Him only. The end is great, not because of her or the spies of Joshua. The end of the story is great because of Him. The end of our story is great because of Him. Amen.